So I want to talk about a topic called tactical empathy. This was proposed by Chris Voss. He was a ex-FBI negotiator, and basically he used to negotiate in hostage kind of situations, right? So there you can't go wrong with negotiation, right? You could go wrong in a business situation, but in a hostage situation is life and death. He's written this book. If you have not read this book, I would recommend read this book, Never Split the Difference. An amazing book to read about not just tactical empathy, but negotiation skills in general, right? And this will be a very handy book. All right. So we are based. We've kind of used his concept of tactical empathy and adapted it to our session. So let's move on with this. So tactical empathy is refers to your skill of understanding the emotions of the others in a specific context. Okay, we are not asking you to empathize with that person in general, that he's got a financial problems at home, he's got wife problems or husband problems or anything else. No, with that specific situation, somebody says that he's not happy, he or she is not happy with the job. It's very contextual. Okay, so why he's not happy with the job, right? So can you develop empathy? Empathy, again, I said, comes from the place of curiosity, right? The more curious you are, the more you can keep your judgment aside and try to know the person better, right? So it involves able to see the situation from the person's point of view, right? So when somebody said that I couldn't meet the deadline, see from his point of view what must have gone wrong for that person to not meet the deadline, or what must have gone wrong for that person to quit in 3 months, right? See from that person's perspective, right? The more you try to see from that person's perspective, the better you are in creating a story or communicating with that person. All right, let's move on. So how do you practice tactical empathy? Three simple ways to do that. Active listening. As they have said, that some wise people have said that you have one mouth and two ears, because God wants you to listen more than to talk, right? So active listening. Ask calibrated questions. When I say curiosity, what do curious people do? They ask a lot of questions, right? So similarly, if you ask questions, you will really unravel, you will understand the truth behind or the real situation, right? And finally, naming emotions. Let's look at them very quickly. So active listening, all of this, why do we do this? Because we want to find out the understand our audience persona. What are, let's keep aside the word persona. We want to know as much as possible about our target audience. That's why we are doing this. All right. So active listening is, when you want to actively listen, you need to calm down your mind, because your mind keeps on chattering a lot, right? When you're listening, you're trying to think, how can I respond to this person? You don't think about that. You listen to that person. Be in the moment. Avoid interrupting the person, this person who's speaking or who's telling you something. Somebody, some new recruit who's leaving the organization. Keep your judgment aside and listen to that person without interrupting that person, right? Reflect on what that person is saying. And the best is, when you understand a person, paraphrase it back to that person, right? So okay, so what I understand from what you're saying is that, okay, you're not happy in the job because you were not given opportunities that you were initially promised. So if you repeat it back to the person, and that person affirms that yes, this is what I said, that means you're on the same page. So it's a good idea to keep paraphrasing and repeating it back to the person, so that the person also knows that you're understanding that person, right? Be in the moment. Yes, as I said. What are the questions you can ask? These are some of the questions you can ask. I'll just leave them on the screen. I will not talk through them. You can take a look at them. These questions come from a position of curiosity. If you are sitting in a certain situation, how do you see this progressing? What do you think the approach will be effective? You're trying to know that person. And the more you try to know these and ask these questions, you might unearth some gems. You might unearth some gold, something that you don't know, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Naming emotions. Now, it's also important to identify or rightly identify the emotions that your audience is feeling and try to name them. So there's a wheel of emotions. Don't get scared by this wheel of emotions. It's just a way of understanding where you fall on the emotions. Typically, the emotions which are on the opposite side of the wheels, they complement each other. So let's say in this case, you're sad. If somebody is sad, the best way to attend to that emotion is to make him joyful, sorry, powerful, right? So this wheel of emotions will be sharing this PPT with you. You can take a look at it. So I'm not going to get into the wheel of emotions right now, but suffice to say that the better you're able to identify the emotion of your audience on this wheel, you know what to do. So, for example, if somebody is anxious, if somebody is anxious about your company is getting merged or there's a restructuring happening and your audience are very anxious, what's the best way to counteract anxiety? Optimism. Optimism best is the best way to counteract anxiety. So your story should be centered around optimism when people are anxious. And that's how this wheel of emotions helps you, right? So you know the emotion of your audience. If it's a negative emotions, you find a corresponding positive emotion and you use that emotion in your communication. But for that, you need to accurately identify what's the emotion in your audience. And for you to identify those emotions, you need to ask the right questions. You see how this all is linking up now, right? So that's how you're empathizing. These are the tools that you can use to empathize.